So, but I would like to ask Ashoka now, Mudli, who's the Chief Architect for Africa Regions in ABSA. He's going to share more microservices view with us, how they're using Bayern in ABSA. And ABSA was joined, I think, Bayern about a year or two ago. So, and it was just great to also start to work with them, and see how we can actually introduce Bayern across banking in South Africa. So, and all of us are also going into the rest of Africa, which you might have seen that Kenny, the new CEO of ABSA, has got a very strong Africa. I wonder where he picked it up. Okay, Shogun, thank you very much, and over to you. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. So I think just some context. So I head up the architecture function for Africa Regions. We're responsible for our retail and business banking operations across Africa. From a geography footprint point of view, we have about 10 banks in 9 countries. So today, I want to take you through a story that many of you in this room are likely living through. And that's of a rigid, monolithic past to a flexible, modular future. So when we talk about Bayern, we often talk about frameworks and standards. But for us at ABSA Africa Regions, Bayern was kind of that North Star that allowed us to untangle decades of legacy, complexity across our markets. So we operate in a largely diverse landscape, so from Kenya to Ghana to Mauritius. And we reached the point where our technology was no longer an enabler. It had become a blocker. We realized that replacing the integration layer wasn't just a technical project. It was a fundamental shift in our banking philosophy. So today I'm going to share with you our journey of how we adopted Bayern, those standards, and how we use those standards to decouple from our channels to our core, to drive reusability and ultimately achieve the Legofication of our banking model. Okay, so let's be honest about the before picture. We didn't arrive at Bayern because it was the latest, greatest buzzword. We arrived there because our legacy core integration layer had reached breaking point. We were dealing with a classic monolithic architecture, the result of a technology stack that was doing more to block us than to build with us. So we've got, duplication was rampant. We had service after service that was doing the exact same thing, just deployed differently across our footprint. Complexity was baked in. We had built complex orchestration directly into our integration layer, which meant that any change caused a ripple effect across our system. And reusability was non-existent. Because of this architecture, we had limited reusability. Every new channel or product required us to build almost from scratch. Ultimately, the writing was on the wall. Our legacy technology was outdated. Simply put, change was becoming far too difficult to execute at the speed our business demanded. So once we admitted we had a legacy problem, the question was Bayern or what? We knew we couldn't build a proprietary standard in a vacuum. We needed to align with where the world was going. And we didn't take this decision lightly. So we benchmarked Bayern against several established global frameworks. So we looked at the UK standards, the HK Money Authority, the Money Authority of Singapore, and eventually we settled on Bayern. And Bayern won for Africa Regions for 4 high-level reasons. One was banking coverage. We needed deep coverage both of banking products and the back office operations. And this is where the buy and service landscape shines. The second lead was the open API fit. It had to be fit for purpose for the external API economy. Thirdly, internal alignment. So we wanted a North Star for our internal APIs so that our internal and external APIs spoke the same language. And finally, it was the ecosystem. So we looked at the prevalence of adoption amongst software vendors and fintechs. And we wanted to ensure we were building against a standard that was widely used. We also realized that non-alignment with the global standard would ultimately increase our time to market and become an interoperability nightmare. So once we committed to buy-in, we had to get practical. Replacing an integration layer is a massive undertaking. And we knew we needed a partner who lived and breathed these standards. That's where TCS came in. As buy-in members themselves, they provided SME guidance where we needed to move from theory to execution. Together, we had to answer 4 critical questions that would define our success. First was the why and the how. So how exactly would a bank with our specific footprint adopt buy-in without breaking the bank? We had to understand the pros and the cons. So we had to be realistic. We took a look at the trade-offs of adoption, balancing the long-term benefits of standardization against the immediate complexity of the shift. We had to understand the upstream and downstream impact. So we couldn't just change the middle. We had to understand what this meant for every application in our estate. And finally, the open banking standards. We looked ahead to the external API model. How could we ensure that the internal work of today would seamlessly support our open banking standards of tomorrow? So we concluded the risk of not aligning with the global standard was far higher, and without buy-in, our integration fintechs would be slow, our framework wouldn't be future-ready, and we'd be stuck with overlapping service boundaries that choke our digital transformation initiatives. So when we started to build, we had to draw a line in the sand regarding our architecture principles. So we made it clear to the organization, this new integration layer was not a like-for-like replacement of the old. We moved away from the idea of retrofitting existing channels. This wasn't merely a protocol change, and we weren't just swapping soap for rest and calling it a day. So we were building a layer that provided 3 critical things for the organization. So the first was decoupling and abstraction. So we separated our customer-facing channels from our core banking and back-end services. Secondly, the standardization. So we used the buy-in framework to enforce strict governance. And lastly, strategic orchestration. So we only orchestrated where it was absolutely required, keeping that architecture lean. So our goal was buy-in level 3 adoption. This meant aligning every internal API to buy-in standards. By doing this, we ensured that the vendor application or in-house solution had to comply with these buy-in based standards if any of these businesses wanted to compete for our business. So we effectively were future-proofing the bank for the open banking and fintech consumption from day one. So this roadmap is, I suppose, the heartbeat of the transformation. It shows exactly how we aligned our technical execution with our business drivers. Specifically, revenue generation, customer experience, and compliance. We didn't just start coding. we followed a rigorous sequence. So the first is the bank's role. We began by analyzing the existing landscape and prioritizing the buy-in alignment. We finalized our level of adoption and mapped services to create wireframes. We established a formal API governance process and defined a buy-in aligned enterprise data model. Only after the governance was in place did we build buy-in microservices where it made sense. To make this happen, we leveraged specific buy-in assets like the service landscape and the API catalog, but we also relied on our partners' assets, the enablers. Their domain mapping framework, as an example, was critical in keeping us on track. The outcomes were transformative. We moved to a plug-and-play service model with a very reduced API footprint, and ultimately opening up new revenue streams to a standard and consistent landscape. So once we had the roadmap, we had to choose our implementation strategy. We looked at three main options. The first was our the Big Bang approach. This involved analyzing every single legacy service and system in one go. We rejected this immediately. It would have taken us years, and by the time we finished, the analysis would have already been outdated as systems evolved. Second, a hybrid approach. We included a high-level buy-in analysis of all services while building an MVP. While it had its merits, we wanted to be even leaner. Our choice was the MVP approach. We decided to review and implement only what was needed based on the real channel requirements and business priorities. The beauty of the MVP approach was its precision. Every requirement was translated from a legacy service to a business function, then directly into a buy-in service domain and operation. It allowed us to focus on our detailed systems analysis, on those core systems of record where it actually mattered for immediate delivery. We accepted that low-level designs would go through several iterations, but this allowed us to start development and testing much faster than any other method. So our implementation approach. So what did the MVP look like in practice? We didn't try to boil the ocean. We found a North Star project to lead the way. The first mover. So we identified a customer channel project as our first customer. This gave us a real-world anchor for our buy-in alignment. We developed the services required for that specific channel first, which allowed us to demonstrate value almost immediately. While the first channel was being built, we analyzed and constructed the remaining required services in parallel, ensuring the pipeline stayed full. I want to be clear, and not everything fits perfectly on day one. We faced residual services that were not easily aligned with buy-in. And managing those legacy outliers probably remains one of the most significant challenges of any modernization journey. By focusing on the channel requirements first, we ensured the architecture was being built to serve our purpose and not just satisfy a technical standard. Okay, and I suppose this is where the rubber meets the road. To achieve the Legofication, we had to move beyond just naming conventions. We had to define what that alignment actually meant for our teams. So we adopted a specific pattern for APSA, aligning the service domain, the URI, and the control record. This wasn't just a surface level change. It meant that the request and response structures were fundamentally transformed. And we maintained a mapping dictionary for every data element to ensure nothing was lost in translation. Looking at the URI examples on the left, we took a messy list of legacy services, often duplicated or named after specific core systems, and mapped them to clean buy-in parts, like /payment initiation. We added specific sub-qualifiers to mirror the bank's context while staying within the buy-in semantic framework. I've shown you the successes, but it's important to talk about the friction we encountered as well. Adopting buy-in wasn't just a copy-paste exercise. First, let's talk about semantic precision. Buy-in provides those reference URIs, but for bank operating in diverse markets, we had to introduce sub-qualifiers, like differentiating between a domestic and international fund transfer, to ensure those services were discrete and mirrored our specific context. Then there was the data mapping challenge. While buy-in business object model is extensive, it didn't cover every single data element unique to our regions. We had to create an extended data model, which required significant domain expertise. To solve this, we eventually built a framework to automate parts of the mapping and to save time. Finally, we had to manage version control. So buy-in is a living standard, and as names changed, for instance, fraud AML resolution, as that became fraud resolution, and document services became document library, synchronizing with the latest buy-in releases required a well-defined process to ensure that we weren't hit with breaking changes mid-execution. So after navigating the challenges, we began to see the true ROI of the buy-in adoption. We categorized this into 4 major strategic wins. The first was a drastic reduction in our time to market. By using the standardized API catalog, we enabled plug-and-play integration capabilities. Standardization meant our developers weren't reinventing the wheel for every project. They were reusing assets across the enterprise. We were unlocking new revenue streams, and this is perhaps the most exciting part. So buy-in enabled an API marketplace model. We can now seamlessly integrate with fintechs and partners to deliver new products that weren't technically feasible under the old monolith. We've achieved a significant reduction in our cost. So we reduced our API footprint by replacing multiple legacy services with a single right-size buy-in API. As an example, we're seeing 20 disparate payment services become 4 standardized ones. And this has a massive impact on long-term maintenance costs. We've seen improved customer satisfaction. So ultimately, this is about the customer. Because we can launch products much quicker and ensure that the architecture is scalable and available, the end-user experience has improved significantly. And finally, by aligning with buy-in, we didn't just fix our tech, we enabled cloud readiness and created a leaner, more modular application stack. And I suppose in the context of Africa, where we have regulations for in-country processing, as an example, by doing what we've done, it's allowed us to cater for that future. We're able to pick this and drop this in any of those markets, should we want to. So if you want to see the impact of buy-in on technical debt, then I suppose look no further than this slide. This is what we meant by standardization and reduced costs. So on the left, you see the reality of our legacy world. We had over a dozen different ways to retrieve individual customer information. Different systems, different parameters, different versions. Every time a developer wanted to build a simple feature, they had to navigate this maze. We had multiple versions of make-build payments and country-specific variants of those APIs. On the right is where we are now. We've replaced that entire alphabet soup with a single API, right-size API, following those buy-in standards. Now, whether you're in Botswana or Kenya, if you need to retrieve party data, you use the URL you see on the right. We didn't just rename them, we consolidated them. We identified where those services were providing identical capabilities, and we merged them. And that helped us move from those 20 related services down to 4. This has allowed us to reduce our API footprint and is a direct driver of those lower maintenance costs and faster onboarding for our developers. So this slide represents the architectural goal for many multinational organizations. It's build once, deploy many. By adopting buy-in standards, we've enabled the Legofication of our banking model. We no longer build a unique integration for a wallet in Botswana or internet banking in Tanzania. Instead, we have a single point of entry for all our channels. So look at the reuse here, right? So we have a common middleware. We have one common buy-in aligned middleware across all our Africa regions and countries. So let's step back. So from a back-end flexibility point of view, whether the core processor is in Seychelles or the wallet processor is in Mozambique, the API remains the same. So we've got standardized parts that I've talked about before. We've got independent innovation. So this is a plug-and-play capability, allowing our countries to independently replace or upgrade the core applications without impacting the rest of our regional footprint. We've effectively decoupled the geography from our technology. This is what has allowed us to achieve massive cost savings and dramatically quicker times to market. So we'll skip that. So I suppose let's look under the hood at the actual architectural blueprint we've deployed across our Africa regions. This is the microservices fabric that makes the Legofication possible. At the top, we have our systems of engagement, from our internet and mobile to our staff channels, and even our chat banking. These are completely decoupled from our core processes. The magic happens in the middle. The API management platform, this is where we enforce our buy-in contracts, manage rate limits, and provide a developer portal. And that allows us to drive reuse across our regional teams. We've got buy-in aligned domains. We've containerized our microservices and organized them into strict buy-in service domains. So whether it's payments, customer data, risk, sanctions, each has its discrete business functionality. System adapters, and I suppose this is the critical component. By using adapters, we've ensured that the buy-in common language is translated into whatever our legacy vendor-specific languages our cores had. The architecture allows us to move at 2 different speeds. Our channels can innovate and change rapidly at the top, while our core processes at the bottom remain stable and protected by the buy-in layer. So as I wrap up, I want to leave you with, I suppose, the distilled essence of what we learned over the last few years. If you're starting or middle of the road in your buy-in journey, here's 6 pieces of advice that we've learned along the way. Start with domain mapping. Don't guess where your complexity is. Map your landscape to reveal the true depth of your legacy spaghetti before you write a single line of code. Enforce strong governance. So standards only work if you stick with them. You must enforce data standards and governance early on to prevent that drift back into your legacy habits. Decouple from vendors. So use your buy-in aligned internal APIs as a shield. This prevents vendor lock-in and gives you the power to swap back-end systems without a total rebuild. Don't make standardization a chore. So give your teams the tooling, the Swagger generators, mapping frameworks that makes it easy for them to stay compliant and drive reuse. Modernize incrementally. So forget the big bang. Move domain by domain, align your microservices, to buy-in service domains one piece at a time. And prepare for culture change. And I suppose this is the most important one. Buy-in adoption is not just a technology change. It's an organizational and cultural shift in how you think about your banking services. We've moved from a world of rigid monoliths to a Lego-fied regional engine. It wasn't easy, but that was the result of, I think, years of work, and I think we're finally future ready. And with that, I thank you, and hand back to you.
We've got some time for questions. Over here.
Hi, thank you so much. That was really insightful. Two things from me. Just in terms of your lessons learned around managing the change, you mentioned that keeping up with the changing standards in the beginning was quite a challenge. Just in terms of lessons learned, how you make sure that you've got a process, a change process that is quite intact and doesn't have has minimal impact across the organization, right? And your last slide was quite interesting. You said aligned domains. I wrote it down. Aligned domains, maybe you can put it up. And being in data management, I wanted to just put it to you and maybe ask, maybe I'm putting it to you, I'm not asking, just around the challenges in terms of interchanging business domain, service domain, and data domains, right? And how we bring the two together, because essentially the buy-in helps you with your data integration. Yes, systems talking to each other, yes, but it's around the data and making sure that the data is integrated well, interoperable within systems so that you can then service your customers well. Just maybe a lesson around how you bring together the culture so that everybody understands that it's all the same thing, right? And we need to align data, service, and I quite like how you said you start from service and then linking to the data. So I don't know if there was a question, but please, if you found a question there, please respond. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think on the change piece, just in terms of the as the buy-in model, we go from year to year. We've got a set timelines every year where we look at the buy-in standard, how are we deviating from the newer versions of it, etc. And we look at where alignment is required. That's something that we've embedded year on year. So I suppose that's one thing that can be done. From a people change, I think it's not necessarily something I think we've got fully right yet. It is getting your various business stakeholders, your technology, your data, etc., all aligned. And there's competing standards as well, right? So although we're on the buy-in roadmap at the moment, we've got a lot of legacy to deal with as well. And I think some of those does take time to change, but it's communication. I think we've just been at it for 6.5 years now, and it's just been continuous communication between the various teams and stakeholders. Around, I suppose, the service domains and the data domains, etc., it's similar. We have a lot of robust conversation, data teams, application teams. There's the FIBO standard as an example, which we've adopted within ABSA. But buy-in does align very much with the FIBO standard. So it's those conversations, right? So although we've got almost two competing standards, they're very much complementary rather than competing. But yeah, it's I think just generally just communication between the teams.
I see Ian Jarvis, you're online. If you can maybe just unmute and voice over your question, please.
Hi. Hope you can hear me. You had on your roadmap slide the task around producing a Bayern-aligned data dictionary. I wondered if you could talk through some of the challenges around that stage in the process.
Sorry, Ian, I'm just having a look at your question. So, Bayern-aligned data dictionary task. Yeah, so that was very early on, and we spent a lot of time understanding the legacy and mapping that to those service domains and the data dictionaries, etc. I think if we look back to the journey, a lot of time was spent in that stage unpacking that. So we had a few enablers that we leveraged from our partner. A lot of that helped. But I suppose it was a lot of detailed analysis work required at the very beginning to make sure we got that right. I think in terms of processes around that, it's making sure you get the correct level of buy-in from your application and your legacy systems, working closely together with yourselves, just so that you can help map those back to the data dictionaries and stuff that's available out there.
Okay, super. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. My question is, if we are doing the same program today and considering you have AI adoption, what would you have done better and how this would have accelerated the entire program based on what you have today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think with what we have today, I think AI would have definitely helped accelerate some of this, right? Especially around understanding the legacy environment and translating that back to the buy-in framework. I think it wouldn't have replaced any specific components of what we've done, but I definitely think it would have accelerated the journey for us.
Yeah, sure. Afternoon, everyone. So my question is around the buy-in assets that you mentioned. So which ones were the most effective for, I guess, communication with the business stakeholders? Because I'm more interested in the business architecture side of things, where now I interact mostly with your process engineers, the business analysts, that side of the world. Which of those assets did you see that resonate more with them? Right? Would it be the business scenarios or the service landscape, and how exactly were they using it?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. I think for this particular initiative, it was a technology-run initiative, right? So not a lot of the business discussions that came into play, especially as part of that migration initiative. But definitely those business scenarios and that service landscape, as we want to move forward, and we've got our business architect in the room as well, those are types of conversations that we are looking to have with business in terms of taking this to the next level for ourselves.
Thank you. My question is around the entire process. Did you engage with external partners to support, or did you do it internally with the internal resources?
Yeah, thanks. So we did use TCS as our partner, and we leveraged them to help us on this journey. They've had extensive experience in this area, so we did leverage them. And they continue to be a partner of ours as we move forward.
Hi, thanks for this. A question to you and perhaps the broader buy-in community. I think with the rise of AI agents, not just to assist developers, but perhaps they'll grow into the more experienced channel, and you might see apps that are AI enabled. Do you foresee any impact on your buy-in layer, or how do you foresee buy-in assisting with communication with those AI agents and new products, for example?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, definitely, right. I think the way we're thinking about AI at the moment is not to solve kind of all our problems. We're looking at an open platform that can help enable us going forward, right? So in terms of our current layer, I think there's some work that needs to happen. So we are looking at certain technologies that we can plug into it that can enable AI for us going forward. But I think, yeah, those are discussions that we're currently having.
And then there's one online question. It's Q from Isle of Man. So Q, if you can maybe just unmute and voice over.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? I think my question is around the mapping that you said you did in line with the buy and bomb model. You mentioned that some of the fields that didn't match, you had to use your own custom data model. What tool did you use to do that custom data model?
Yeah, thanks. So we leverage our partners' data model mapping capability there. So they did help us extensively, especially around the data mapping piece. Yeah.
Okay, Shogun, thank you very much. It's always, as an architect, so good to hear that we start to introduce reuse into organizations and not just talking about it, but actually doing so. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. So really appreciate it.